Hello, everyone. My name's Lee, and this is the Grief on a Tuesday Night podcast. So, a little bit of an intro as to what this is about. This is about the loss of a loved one or a very close relative, and some of the things that happen maybe on the day and certainly for the next few weeks and months afterwards. And hopefully, this might resonate with people and maybe help people, hopefully, along the way. My partner died back in October of 2024, and life completely changed in that morning. I won't go into the details of what happened on that day, but suffice to say, the ambulance people were fantastic. They really earn the money. Those people, they're incredible, and things happen very quickly at the hospital, and by late morning she'd gone, and it was a sudden realization from that point that that life had changed. And part of the reason for calling this Grief on a Tuesday Night was that soon afterwards I checked in to find out about possible routes on therapy, group sessions, that type of thing, and came across a fantastic organization called Cruise, and they do a sort of setup meeting where people can go along and find out what they do, what they can offer. And a lot of people, and certainly including the people we ended up in our group with, we didn't really want to do one-on-ones. There's obviously a lot of pressure to talk and say things in one-on-ones, where it's not so much when you're in a group. You got time to think. You're obviously going to have time listening to people and obviously helping other people possibly along the way as well. But you'll have your times when you're going to be able to talk about things, but there's no sort of pressure to talk all the time. And I think that's why a lot of us preferred to go down the route of a group therapy session. And we had 7 weeks, and as someone who always thought that, therapy in whichever form has got to help, has got to be good for people to talk, and now I've experienced it, I can only say that, yeah, absolutely, 100%. If it's something you can do, if it's something you've got the time to do, you really should look into it, because it helped absolutely massively for myself. And it was wonderfully run by the two women, the one woman in particular who led the sessions, and the lady who helped her, but the other 5 people apart from myself. I think the thing that you experience that you probably don't get from, say, your friends or family is that understanding, a real understanding of what you're going through and have gone through. Excuse me. There were certain things, certain times, and I can touch on them more at another time. But I think outside of those 4 walls, if I'd have probably said some of the things I said, they would have been taken differently and a lot more negatively. And the reaction and the support from the people in those weeks in our group was absolutely mind-blowing, to be honest. A couple of times I came back and I spoke to my son, and he asked me how it had gone, and I said, quite frankly, I'm staggered by the reaction, because I was expecting it to be, even if not negative, a bit sort of certainly not as positive and supportive as it was. But yeah, I can touch more on those sort of aspects of the group therapy sessions later on, but I'd heartily recommend them. I really would. So yeah, going back to that day in October of 2024, obviously when we were there, we were left in a room, and it was probably the only point I'd say where, and I know the NHS are underfunded, they're understaffed, and they work so hard, but we were sort of left in a room, and the young girl who came to see us, we had obviously had a lot of questions. We were in shock. It was something that a few hours ago in the morning had been unthinkable. And it did seem to be a case of refer to the leaflet, refer to the pamphlet. And if we did have other questions, it seemed to keep going back to refer to the leaflet. So in the end, we went home, and there was a sudden realization. I drove home with my son that, my word, I'm a single dad. What are we going to do for tea? It was ridiculous things instantly, even before thinking about speaking to funeral directors and that sort of thing. And your mind's a blur. It's very hard. I mean, to be honest, the drive home, I do remember I turned the radio off. We listened to music all the time in the car, and I turned it off because I didn't want to remember any songs being part of that journey back from the hospital to home, and I didn't want that memory sort of imprinted. Oh, we were listening to that, so I deliberately turned it off. And then after the initial night, the first night, we sat down the next day, and I realised there was going to be a flood of things to sort out, and there was. Now, what I would say initially, and this is just from my experience, the first couple of things that were really, really important was to we had separate bank accounts, and we did everything together, shared everything money wise, did different bits and bobs, but we just felt it was easier as we went along in life to have separate accounts. Now, the first thing we were told was to make sure her bank account was stopped and was frozen. So we got that organised, and they were very good. They gave me a little list of a few direct debits and things where obviously, that would be stopped, and I guess people would be in contact, and they were. And the second thing was to get hold of the death certificate from the local council. Again, we made an appointment. Myself and my son went in, spoke to a very nice lady, go through a lot of the details, some information you have to give her from the hospital, and they print off your death certificate. Now, I was told at the time to get more copies, so we did. I think we got 5 in total. Our council charged £12 per copy for these. As it turned out, from us, with all the emails that followed, I think all bar one were quite happy to have a photocopy, just a phone camera shot of it sent over to them, because it was just one page. A lot of them were the same with the wills, as long as it was front and back and clear to see. They were okay. So in the end, maybe a few of the copies weren't needed, but I know other people who've said they've dealt with companies who insisted on having the original document, so it may well be worth doing that. Now, I think I'd set myself, once we had the bank account frozen, we had the death certificate, and we had people to contact and companies who were going to contact us. So I knew there'd be a lot of emails to follow. But if I'm honest, I wasn't prepared for it. I thought maybe 2 to 3 weeks I would be able to sort out the vast majority of things that needed to be organised, and I was hugely naive regarding that. I would say in the end, it probably took between 3 to 3.5 months to get things sorted. One of which involved probably 20 to 25 emails over the course of those 3 months. She had a car which he'd purchased a few years previously. I won't mention the company's name, but it sounds a bit like Winch. And initially, they were seemingly very, very helpful. It was the first of the emails that started off with "We're so sorry for your loss" and blah blah blah. And in the end, that became very hollow. But yeah, this company, it wasn't just a case of saying, is it still on A purchase agreement has been paid off. As it turns out, it hadn't been finalised, and we assumed there'd be a choice of either keeping it or sending it back. But it certainly wasn't the case that we could deal direct with them, and they passed us on to someone else. The second company passed us on to a third company, and the third company passed on to a fourth. And initially, after a few weeks, I had no further information, nothing that could help. So I went back to the start again and spoke to Winch, and was given the same answers, and we went through the same process again. And there were times when, I have to say, these sort of things can make you incredibly short-tempered and angry. It's something we spoke about a lot in the group therapy sessions, especially when you feel like with these companies that they're very faceless, and it became unbearable. Sometimes you'd email one and they come back and they give you "Oh, we're really sorry for your loss," and then you'd reply, and then somebody different would come back to you and start off by saying, "We're very sorry for your loss." And I had this with one company 3 times in a row, and it really does become, it's copy and paste, I know, but it's very, very hollow, and you don't feel like you're actually getting anywhere with these people at all. All I can say is you've really got to. There were times when I got so angry with it. I spoke to a family member and said, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. And it did feel like the weight of the world was on top of me at some points during this process. But all I can say is you really do just have to keep at it, and eventually somewhere you'll get out the other side of it. And like I say, I think probably it was around 25 emails to 4 companies, just regarding one issue. This was just one thing. And this was with them accepting death certificates and wills and all this sort of thing. It took a long, long time, and a lot of soul searching, a lot of anger. But this one company, which turned into 4 companies and countless emails, was eventually resolved. But it would carry on into the companies she'd worked for. One was fantastically helpful, couldn't have been more helpful. But then you'd be dealing with insurance people, and then again that became difficult. Sometimes you would spend an hour filling in forms, making sure that everything was present and correct to be sent back, and we go through again and we double check, and then somebody would come back, and someone you'd already dealt with again, saying, "Oh, we're very sorry for your loss," and then say, "Oh, well, this hasn't been filled in right," or when we double checked, and I actually replied to one of them and said, "Well, it has. I've got everything here." And then they came back and didn't even sort of apologize to say, "Oh, actually, yeah, you had done it properly." They just said, "Oh, yes, now we can proceed with this." But there are times when it just becomes unbearable, and you get so angry about it. I can't even describe. And it's something when you speak to the other people in the meetings, you think you can't be reacting right. You can't be this angry. So not just angry. I can't think of a word for it, but it's a really normal thing. It's a normal thing to be angry in grief anyway, in many different ways. But yeah, dealing with these people, and I know that some people have it even harder if a relative dies abroad, having to deal with the authorities in another country, that sort of thing. It just must be unbearable. So all I would say is that there is a way out. There is an end to these emails, because they will just, and it's not just emails, it's phone calls as well. But I did try and keep it as much as I could to emails. Obviously dealing with dealing with the funeral directors. Sometimes you're dealing with such things that are so close to home and so hard to bear and hard to talk about, but somehow you've got to get through it. I mean, I'm talking sort of 4 months on now. I couldn't have spoken about this in this sort of state three months ago, and this is very possibly where the group sessions have really helped. And like I say, I thought initially I'd be looking at 2 to 3 weeks, and I was lucky that I had many jobs. It's only about 6. But I had to get away. It was a very toxic place to work, and it was not good. Let's put it that way. So I was actually off when this happened in October. So I felt I had time to deal with it without the pressure of, well, I've got to get back to work. I've got to be back to work next week. So I had time. I had time to be with my son and to help him through it with anything he needed. I was here all the time. And like I say, I set myself maybe 2-3 weeks. I'm going to get these things sorted. And it was incredibly naive. It was never going to happen. I remember saying almost that very line at the initial meeting with Cruz, when you go to the first meeting, they spend a bit of time and split you into 2 groups, and you get to say a few things about why you're there and certain things that are happening. And I mentioned this, and straight away you look around and people are nodding and they get it. And I think this is the thing with the group sessions, that everybody understands. They're all going through different types of grief, different family members or husbands, wives, but everybody understands. And like I say, even when I've maybe said things that outside of those 4 walls would have been taken differently and been seen as quite negative, not only have people understood, but they've been so supportive, and you've been made to feel like, actually, I'm not a freak for thinking that or acting that way. And it's I was incredibly lucky, actually. I mean, I hope, as I sit here now, our sessions have only recently finished. And the lady who took the sessions, was in charge, said most groups will meet up, once a month, and all keep in touch. And I really hope we do. Everyone was so good in that group. And yeah, I couldn't thank them enough for some of the reactions to some of the things that I've mentioned and I've said too. So there's probably a lot more I can say, which maybe I'm going to do next week. I don't know who this might reach, how this will work, or if it's just going to end up being something I can look back on as a bit of sort of audio therapy for myself. This is only in an audio version. Nobody needs to see my ugly mush on the screen. So yeah, I hope it might possibly just help. But yeah, grief on a Tuesday night. That was because of the Tuesday night meetings we had with Cruz. So I thought this might be a nice title for this little podcast. And what I was going to do, because this is going to be very unplanned and very raw. It's not going to be a polished podcasts that there's millions of them, absolutely millions of them out there. This is just going to be very raw. I've got a few notes to go on, but that is it. And what I thought I'd do along the way to hopefully make it not too down and depressive. And I know it's hard because of the topic, but I just sort of finish off each bit with something to do with something like TV, sport, and music. Sort of three things that I love, especially football and music, and some other sports too. But so TV, there was a couple of things that were recommended in our sessions. One was called Dead to Me, which was on Netflix, which actually starts with a woman in a group therapy session, which is why it sort of hit home at the time, because we recognized everything that was sort of going on. Another one that I'd watched previously on Netflix was Afterlife, written by Ricky Gervais, which I loved beforehand anyway. And then when I watched it after what had happened to me, you do actually see it from a completely different angle and understand so much why Tony was so angry at people, why he treated people the way he did. You absolutely get it. You understand it. No matter how he talks to people, you get it. I think Ricky Gervais was absolute genius, quite frankly, in making that. And I'd really recommend that too. And sport this weekend, well, in the Premier League, Aston Villa beat Brentford 1-0 at the GTEC Stadium. Ollie Watkins, the ex-Brentford player, got the winner. At the time, they went up to 7th in the league, and they're hanging in there, knocking on the door for the European spots next week. And there's a big game on Wednesday night against Bruges, second leg. Obviously, a really good result, 3-1 away in the first leg, but Bruges are no mugs. They're a good side. They beat an even better side, I think, in Atalanta in the previous round. So, yeah, Villa are going to have to be right on point from the start. And music-wise, well, I'm a metalhead and I like rock, and I do like other stuff as well. Sometimes I can play stuff in the car and I can get quite a shock look from my lad as to, wow, what's this? Why you listen to this? But in the main, I do like loud music, especially loud, shouty music. But yeah, just at the moment, a couple of albums I've been listening to was Volbeat, band from Denmark, bit of a mix between Metallica and Elvis Presley. So I've been listening to a couple of their albums, one of the early ones, Guitar Gangsters and Cadillac Blood, which I really like. So yeah, we'll see how this goes from here. There's more I can obviously talk about maybe next week if I'm looking at doing one of these in a week. But I just hope maybe some of these things might resonate with you. It's a bit of additional therapy for me to talk about it again, so it's just helpful. But yeah, certainly from the standoff point, it was if your partner's got a separate bank account to get it frozen ASAP, and obviously to get hold of a death certificate too. And that's it. So as I say, my name's Lee. This is Grief on a Tuesday night, and hopefully we'll speak again soon. All the best.